Coming up on the Tall Mike Wine Podcast.
Janet and I shared a hug when she first arrived.
Yes.
At the winery. It's probably only the second or third hug I've given to anybody in a year and a half.
She's very talented and knows a lot of people.
That's the key in Hollywood.
That's right.
I know some people.
I know some people.
Let's take a meeting.
They had fruit wine.
What kind of fruit wine was there?
Lollaberry wine, cranberry wine.
It's starting to sound like the 1970s.
You know, I'm crazy. You know that, Mike, right? You know that from talking to me.
And now, the Tall Mike Wine Podcast.
The cell phones have been silenced. The wine is in the glasses, just poured. Please join us as we sip, and just like that, the podcast begins. The Tall Mike Wine Podcast. The podcast people are talking about in 16 countries, on 5 continents. We cracked the code and are now in Australia, Brazil, Italy, and Germany. And in 34 of these United States, major cities like Olathe, Kansas, Pinole, California, Hamtramck, Michigan, Tukwila, Washington, and Boonville, Mississippi. Wherever you are, thanks so much for taking some time for our humble wine and chat show we will attempt to amuse. My name is Mike Stone, speaking to you from the Vintner's Room at Nicholson Ranch Winery in Sonoma, California, a small production winery, but great in many, many ways. My guest today is someone who sells wine for a living. She doesn't own a wine store or work in a winery. She works in distribution. This means she sells the wine you see when you go to the wine shops, the stores, and once again to the restaurants. The vast majority of the wines you see out in the world are placed there mainly by these people, distributors or brokers. We'll find out how that all works and if it's any fun, because we're all about fun here. But also, my guest is a filmmaker. You didn't see that coming, did you? She made a short film that was released last year and went out on the festival circuit. Let's get into the conversation. My guest is Janet Dyer. Hi, Janet.
Hi. Thank you for having me. This is so fun.
My pleasure. How was life?
Oh, life's good. It's a big relief. I'm all vaccinated and you are, and we can hug people. And,
Janet and I shared a hug when she first arrived.
Yes,
at the winery.
Absolutely.
It's probably only the second or third hug I've given to anybody in a year and a half.
Beautiful weather here, too. This is a beautiful winery.
We are recording on a Wednesday afternoon in, what is this, the middle of May. It's beautiful. It's about 80 degrees. We're about to sip some nice white wine to cool off. All right, Janet, you made this film. You wrote it?
I wrote it with my business partner in Lotus Wine Films.
Okay. And did you direct it also?
No, she directed it.
Okay.
She is a veteran producer, writer in the film industry and directs, and she's very talented and knows a lot of people.
Okay.
Which is good.
That's the key in Hollywood.
That's right.
I know some people.
I know some people.
Let's take a meeting.
That's right.
So I wanted to see it when you sent it out last year, and I didn't get around to it. Then when we booked you for the show, I was ambivalent about watching because a part of me wanted to learn about it from you as we chat. So tell me what the film is about and how it came to be.
First of all, it's called Corked.
Okay.
The short film is called Corked. And the feature film is called Corked. That's all copywritten and everything.
Don't try to steal it.
We own it.
Don't try to steal it.
That's
Corked.
right.
So I'm guessing it's a film about wine.
That's right.
Okay.
It's a film about wine. It was shot in November of 2019. We got delayed by the fires by 2 weeks. And it was shot at Fopiano Vineyards, which still looks like the 70s. So it's the 70s, which is when I started.
When you started working in wine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I worked at a winery, and Fopiano was one of the first wines I sold. Let me tell you, it's not easy finding a winery that looks like it did in the 70s, but they do.
So the movie is set in the 70s in the wine industry in California.
Right.
What is the basic story?
It is my story of being a woman working in the wine business, starting in the wine business at a winery, what I went through starting in wine.
So this is autobiographical.
It is autobiographical.
But is it based on your story?
Yes, it is.
So it's like it's a work of fiction.
Yes.
But based on your experiences.
Correct.
So tell me about the wine business in the 70s.
Oh my God. I don't know if we have enough time.
All right. But the California wine industry was not as big as it is now, not even close.
Then I could name all of the wineries. There were, I think, 25.
Wait, all the wineries?
Can you
all the wineries in the whole state?
Uh-huh.
Whoa.
Yeah, there were about 25 wineries when I started.
That's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. I worked my way through school at UCSB in Santa Barbara, and I worked at a winery, and they hired me because I grew up in Petaluma. And I could tell tourists how to get here to Sonoma County. So I asked them, I used to do invoicing and I ran the tasting bar in the retail room. And I asked them if I could go sell wine for a day.
Go sell wine
Yeah.
out in the world.
In the world.
To restaurants, to wine shops.
To retail shops in Santa Maria, because my brother-in-law at the time worked for a beer distributor, and he gave me a few accounts that I could go to.
Wow. So you just took it upon yourself.
I sure did.
And they were not selling wine outside of the winery at that point?
They were. They were selling wine outside of the winery, but I saw what the salesman was and wasn't doing. And of course, at the time, I was told I could never go into the enology lab. I couldn't look at the records. I couldn't, blah, blah, blah. So, of course, when nobody was around, I did. And I looked at everything. I read everything I could. They had fruit wine. I looked at the blends of the fruit wine.
What kind of fruit wine was there?
They made Olalla berry wine, cranberry wine, mead. Oh, you wouldn't believe how much sugar's in that.
It's starting to sound like the 1970s.
It was the 1970s. It was a lot of fun working in that tasting room, I've got to say.
So the movie, which is based on your story, talks about how hard it was to be a woman in the wine industry.
Absolutely.
Back in the day.
So after that, I had a manager at the time in the tasting room, a woman who was in a tasting group. And she pulled me into this tasting group. The tasting group consisted of Jim Clendenin, who just passed away. Bob Lindquist, who owned Coupe.
Right.
My first tasting was a tasting of a bunch of Sauterne from 1971. And we had to kick in like $20 each for this because the wines were expensive.
Sauterne back then was even expensive.
So 1971. If you could even touch it now,
I'm sure those wines are out there.
It would be a down payment on a house.
I'm sure those wines are out there still. But it'd be more than $20 to enjoy the tasting.
And of course, I was 21, I guess, maybe 22. And I said, ew, it's so sweet. I think I like the Olalla berry better. I mean, they're like, get her out of here and don't bring her back.
All right. So that maybe didn't go so great.
But I went on to work for a small wholesaler and a broker. I handled Santa Barbara County and Ventura County. And at the time, there were two women selling wine in Santa Barbara County. One worked for Gallo, the other Inglenook, the Inglenook distributor. And then there was me with the fine wine. And I worked in Ventura County. I was the first woman to sell wine wholesale in Ventura County.
Blazing the trail.
Yes, blazing the trail.
So I was very young in the 70s,
Yeah,
too young to really
older
understand
than
how the world worked. Were you encountering just blatant male chauvinism wherever you went?
Oh my God, yes. Unbelievable. And some of that stuff made it into the feature film.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
So we're talking about a male-dominated industry, whether it's wine retail or restaurants or anything. the men control the wine lists or the shelves, and there are men coming there selling the wine. So
Absolutely.
total domination.
My boss had given me a briefcase, and it was like a big square, kind of looking like a suitcase.
Okay.
And at the time, the shops all sold cigarettes. You know, people used to go around. There were some women selling cigarettes. It looked like a briefcase that you would put cartons of cigarettes in. So when I walked into a shop, they're like, "Oh, do you have any Winstons?" Or, you know.
Comes another cigarette girl with her box full of cigarettes.
It was really funny. And I said, "I sell wine." Everybody would stop. You know, the owner, the clerks, there'd always be about 4 of them. And they're like, "You what? You sell wine?" As they got to know me, they'd say, "Hey, the wine chick's here." You know?
Okay.
And I'd say, "That's right. I grew up in Petaluma. Chickens, you know."
Let me invite you to the butter and egg parade.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Wow.
right.
It's pretty fascinating to think about the times that we have left behind for the most part. I mean, I think it's still pretty difficult for women in the wine industry,
I think so.
but a lot of things have changed.
Yes, a lot of things have changed. Absolutely. I have to taste this Gruner now.
Yes. So we're sipping a white wine. The first wine is a wine that Janet brought with her today. It's a Gruner Veltliner, but it's not from Austria. It's from the state of Oregon.
Yes, and it's grown near Mount Hood from a winery called Shanann, which is Sineann.
I've always seen that label and wondered.
Yeah,
how it was
you have to
pronounced.
think Sinead O'Connor or Sinn Féin, you know,
Okay.
S-I in Gaelic.
So we're talking about some Irish people making this
Yeah,
wine
that's
in
right.
Oregon.
Irish origin. So, of course, they globbed onto me and I globbed onto them.
I'll have it all written in the show notes and
Right.
a link to the winery,
Right.
of course. So what do you think of this wine?
Well, I think it's really great. It's got a lovely weight to it that you don't get from Austria. Usually they're a little more acidic, a little brighter from Austria. This is from Pear Blossom Vineyard. And I think just that power of suggestion of pear. It's got a little pear edge, doesn't
I was thinking
it?
green apple, but when you said pear blossom, I started thinking about honey and pears. And this almost has that thing going on. It almost tastes like it has a tiny little bit of residual sugar, does it?
It does, but it
Okay.
doesn't.
It does, but it doesn't?
Yeah, it's delicious,
Which is
isn't it? And by the way, Shanann is not the old Gaelic. It's not the new Gaelic, but it's the middle Gaelic, and it means this is it.
That's what the word Shanann means? It means
Yes, this is it.
is
Shanann.
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 Not like Shazam.
That's right. There you go. Now
This is
you'll
it.
remember it.
All right. This is a Gruner Veltliner from 2019, so it is it's nice and fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's got
yes.
just a hint of sweetness to it. So I'm thinking Thai food,
Yes.
you know,
Absolutely.
something with a little kick.
Absolutely.
There's a Thai place I go to in Nevada, which is where I live. I get what they call the spicy pepper lamb.
Oh, that would be perfect.
Really delicious chunks of lamb that they must marinate for days and days and days in something.
Wow.
And then they sear it and toss it with veggies and some kind of sauce. So
Well-
it's got a little kick to it, a little spice, but this would be so nice to just cut right through it.
I don't think we'll go through this bottle. You should go get some of that Thai food and take that bottle for
Maybe.
with you.
All right, so the film, Corked.
Corked.
Currently, it is a short film that lives in the world of short films.
Yes. What happened is it's just the film circuit, the short film circuit or the film festivals are just ending.
Right?
So we are going to launch our website with the film so that people will be able to see it.
Okay.
And that should be soon. But for now, you can follow us on Facebook, Cork to the Film, and on Twitter.
Corked the film, all one word.
Yeah, or Corked Film. Yep.
Corked film.
Just look it up. We're on Twitter and Facebook.
All right. So it's a look into the wine business from more of a winery perspective. in the 1970s?
No,
No?
it's from a woman's perspective.
Women at a winery. I watched the trailer. There's a lot of winery footage there.
It was crazy when I entered the wine industry.
But you're still in the wine
I'm
industry,
still in the wine
which says a lot
industry.
about you.
Yeah.
And hopefully it says a lot about the wine industry.
Yes,
Because
yes.
obviously if you're still doing it, it must be working for you.
Well, the short film, thanks to Lori's brilliance and vision, and we went to a editor called eFilm out of Hollywood who edited it and put a filter on it. It gives you a feel
Okay.
of the 70s.
I was going to say the trailer, I've seen the trailer
Yeah.
multiple times.
Yeah.
It has that, what do they call that? Like sepia tone.
That's right.
Is that am I getting that right?
it's sepia, but not quite. Like if you look at Cotton Club from Francis Ford Coppola,
Okay.
that's definitely done in sepia tones.
Okay. All right.
This one is a filter. It just gives you the feeling.
Yeah,
I mean,
the
if you look
focus
at,
is a little softer.
That's
You know,
right.
you don't feel like you're watching a thing in high definition where you can see everybody's pores.
Right.
You know,
exactly.
it's like no, that's the way it looked in the 1970s. You know, like when you
that's
go
right.
to your mom's house and you pull a shoebox full of old pictures out.
right.
They look so much different.
right.
Than the picture. Well, we don't even have pictures in shoeboxes anymore.
That's
than the
right.
pictures you see on your phone on Instagram.
That's it. And we wanted to add, and we did add to the short film the music
Okay.
of that time, which is great. We had two well-known actors. We had Eric Lutz, who is a friend of Lori's, and she directed him in another short film. He's a working actor. You'd recognize him. We have Jimmy Fails, who is Last Black Man in San Francisco.
Okay.
And we got him because our DP lived across the street from him. He liked the script. He was interested. And he was my son's skateboard buddy. And he was riding Corked at the time. And so I got to see Jimmy. He's got a huge following. Last Black Man in San Francisco. Have you seen it?
I have not, but I know it's a big indie film. It's still on the list. So
indie.
eventually there will be a corked full-length feature motion picture.
Correct.
And you said something, the script has been nominated for an award already.
We are a finalist in the Big Apple Film Festival, which is going on today and tomorrow.
So if the script is in a finalist for a competition then, and it wins, then obviously people are going to rush to make it, right?
Yeah, you would hope so.
People with lots of money in their pockets are going to say, yes, I'll fund this movie.
You would hope
I'll
so.
fund this movie.
Yeah.
Keep me posted.
I will.
Janet, were you inspired by some of the great films about wine to make this film?
I'm not quite sure if I was inspired.
There's a lot of films with wine in them. I was looking online, like, okay, we should talk about some movies that feature wine. I haven't seen most of them because, you know, if it's a movie and it has wine in it, they usually get it wrong.
Right.
Which is my experience with
Of
most
course.
things that you get close to, and then there's a movie about what you do, and you're
Right.
like, that's total bullshit.
Right. Right. Like we could talk about Bottle Shock.
Bottle Shock is on my
Yeah.
list here.
Yeah,
I actually saw
okay.
that. I thought, you know, it was kind of cheesy.
It was entertaining.
But, you know, it had a happy ending. And what was that guy's name? Chris Pine was in it.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it talked about the Judgment of Paris. It got
Right.
the facts and figures pretty right.
Right.
So I thought that was an okay wine movie.
The thing that bugged me about it,
What's
it was
that?
like the main actor, the guy that played Steven Spurrier.
Right?
I judged for 20 years for San Francisco International Wine Competition. I judged with Steven a few times. I loved Steven's. He was wonderful. Why did they have that actor instead of Hugh Grant? You know, he was like the cutest Englishman. Have Hugh Grant. The guy that played him passed away, so I don't want to say anything bad about him. He was not the right guy to
Okay,
play
you just
Steve.
didn't think that casting was a great
I
decision.
didn't think the casting was great. I thought it was entertaining and cute. Now, Sideways which
Okay,
is
that's
the
also on my list.
biggie.
That's one of the bigger wine movies.
Right.
And I thought Sideways was, aside from a fun movie about a couple guys on a wine tasting trip,
Right. That was
I
hilarious.
thought Sideways was a classic buddy movie.
Oh, I agree.
You know, a movie about these guys and their friendship. And it could have been set with them having a weekend doing almost anything. They just happened
Right.
to focus on wine, which was cool. They went into Santa Barbara.
I agree. I thought it was a lot of fun. I worked with a guy who consulted on the wine for that movie. And at the time, I basically specialized as an independent contractor. I now work for 2 companies. I used to work for 6, and I had mostly Pinot Noir. My business went up 45%. So thank you very much.
Wow.
However, some people had to rip out Merlot. And that was very unfortunate.
Yeah, people mention that here because we do have some Merlot. We do grow a couple of acres of Merlot. People
Right.
say, oh, that movie Sideways, I bet it killed your Merlot. I said, well,
Yeah.
it might have killed Merlot, but it did great things for Pinot.
That's right.
And I think at one point in that movie, the production of that movie, they just needed a thing that people in the wine business or wine people in general were ranting about at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And Merlot was having its moment of being ultra popular and then ultra overproduced by corporate America. And it kind of lost its identity and turned into this sort of soccer mom wine. And I think that was the intent of that rant. Merlot, there's just too much Merlot. Everybody's sick of Merlot. And I think they probably left that part of the script blank. And then when they were getting ready to film that scene, they called somebody up in the wine business like, all right, what are you guys pissed off about? And somebody says, goddamn Merlot.
Yeah.
Now, if they did the same thing today, they had it all set to go. The script is written, except there's a little blank spot there where the rant is coming, and they were getting ready to film that scene with the rant, and they called me. I'd say, rosé all day.
Right.
Go ahead. Let him have it.
No kidding, huh? Rosé all
I'm
day.
not going to drink any fucking rosé.
But I could drink it all day long.
Okay.
You know, the thing with corked, I have to say, it's going to be really good for the wine business in general.
Okay.
Imports too.
Did you ever see A Walk in the Clouds?
Oh, I think I did. The
That's
one about France.
Keanu?
Yeah, and
Keanu's in
it was a love story.
A love story set in post-Prohibition. I want to say it was set in post-Prohibition Napa, but I don't know. I never saw it.
Yeah.
It was one of those Keanu Reeves movies. I saw the trailer. I'm like, yeah, I can't compete with that.
Yeah.
I don't need to see that.
Yeah, it's not in the forefront of my memory.
That was from the 90s. Okay, we talked about Bottle Shock. Did you ever see A Good Year with Russell Crowe?
A Good Year. You know, I'm not sure I did with Russell
These movies come and
Crowe.
go. These movies come and go.
Yeah, that's right.
Of course, Wine Country, the chick flick with all the funny ladies.
Oh, God, I saw that. Oh,
That
my
to me, it was
God.
like so many cliches.
I
All the cliches.
I wanted to like it so much.
I was looking
just
forward to it.
hated it.
All I could do was watch the trailer, and I was
Oh.
like, okay, I don't need to see this movie. This
I
looks
just-
terrible.
It was awful.
What about the
frankly.
Psalm movies? Psalm and Son of Psalm and the other
Yeah.
Son of Psalm, the one they don't talk about?
Yeah, they should have some women in those movies, don't you think?
Probably so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's something about that whole. I mean, I have friends that have studied and gone up the ladder, and it's all very serious and really cool, and I root for them.
Uh-huh.
But seeing a whole movie about people that I don't know that are doing
Right.
that same thing, it just
Yeah.
there's no appeal for me.
I know.
And then it just kind of makes wine culture.
God.
All right. And then the last movie that I wrote down here. This you're going to have to look this up because this is
Okay.
hilarious. It's a horror movie called The Vineyard, and it's a horror movie revolving around a vintner who uses the blood of his victims to make wine.
Ooh. I'm going to look for it for sure. I've got to tell you about one more.
All right.
And I live in San Francisco, and I have gone to completely Chinese DVD shops looking for this movie because I saw it in the 90s on KQED. And it was a Chinese movie about a vineyard worker, a winery in China around World War II. And this woman was married off to this owner of the vineyard who was really old. A week after they were married, he died, and she had all these vineyard workers. And
this is a movie that's in Chinese.
In love with one of them. And they were low one vintage on the quantity of wine, so they all peed in the barrels. It was like, oh my God. Oh my God.
You had me up to that point.
All subtitled, and I can't find it.
You had me up to that point.
So if anybody out there knows.
It's our secret ingredient.
It was such a good movie.
When do you think it was made?
It was in the 90s. It was great.
Maybe somebody will send me an email.
Yeah, maybe somebody will, hopefully.
Film buff.
Yeah.
Some Chinese
Get this podcast
film
going
aficionado.
in Hong Kong or something.
I don't have anybody listening in China, but
Damn.
there is somebody listening in South Korea.
Okay.
So close. Let's talk about your day job a little bit.
Okay.
Wine distribution. We talked about how you got into that in the 1970s, which is amazing.
Yes.
Who do you work for now?
I work for Northwest Wines.
Okay.
And we specialize in Oregon, Washington, and Germany.
What's the guy's name? Is it Tom?
Tom Elliott. I've worked for Tom Elliott.
I met Tom a million years ago in San Francisco. And the reason I was so excited when I met him was, of course, I'm from Seattle. And my first wine epiphanies came in the Columbia Valley in Yakima in the Tri-Cities, Washington. So I'm in San Francisco working in restaurants, feeling like a total fish out of water. And in walks Tom, and he hands me his card, Northwest Wine.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if he remembers that.
Isn't that funny?
But
I've
I
been
remember
with
that.
him for 21 years
That's
already.
amazing.
Oh, my God. And I work for Shiverick Imports.
Okay.
David Shiverick. He's wonderful. And his daughter works for him. She's wonderful. And they're very much like Northwest Wines. They handle small, lesser-known properties of really good quality. A lot of them are sustainable or organic. It's French, Portuguese, Italian. They're just all wonderful, and they're well-priced. And, I like working for those small guys.
And your territory is San Francisco?
And Marin.
And Marin County, just north of the city where I live.
I've kind of had this huge wealth of experience. I did own part of a distributorship called Adventures in Wine. I owned a quarter of it, and I brought in, you'll love this, it took me 3 months to talk my former partner into bringing in Leonetti into the state. Yeah, so I brought Leonetti in, I brought Chenin in, I brought Owen Rowe in. So I love doing that kind of thing, finding really unknown, really beautiful properties.
Right.
I think I was probably the first person, well, at least in the West, to bring in Uruguayan wines, which I don't think turned into a huge hit.
That sounds like a lot of great, rewarding experiences in your long-time career as a wine salesperson. Tell me about the hardest part of the job.
I think maybe some of the hardest parts are sometimes dealing with buyers who you want to kick.
Sure.
And you imagine that and do it in your head.
I always want to ask people that are in the wine sales business about this. How many miles do you put on your car every year?
How many miles?
Because it's just a day of driving and visiting here and visiting there. I mean, the city's not very big, but still, you're driving all over the city and then into Marin, which is a few miles away across the Golden Gate Bridge.
Right. I put with my accountant, I have to go through that at least 12,000, 15,000.
No, it doesn't sound shocking.
It's not horrible.
Not horrible.
But yeah.
I think you should have some of the red wine.
Oh, I should.
That I have brought.
I should. Here, let me. A 2010 Celloli Chianti Classico. I love
Celloli Chianti Classico is what we're doing.
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
All right, I brought this from my home stash. I don't have a cellar. I have a big wine rack. It's big, and people that don't know anything about wine or don't drink wine come into the house and they say, "Oh, you have so much wine." And I say, I get thirsty sometimes.
I love Chianti Classico after a long flight.
Because?
It brings me back down to earth.
Well, this is very earthy smelling wine. Mm-hmm. This is a 2010 vintage Chianti Classico. Chianti.
This is delicious.
A pretty big region in Tuscany. Chianti Classico is the meat of it, right in the center. The name of the winery is San Fabiano Calcinaia, and this wine is called Celloli. And the first thing I thought when I held my nose up to it was, tree bark.
Good year, too.
It's got some nice tree bark on the nose for sure.
Yeah. Definitely. This is delicious.
It's definitely spent some time in barrel.
Oh, yeah.
You can smell the barrel for sure.
I should have brought some cheese.
That'd be nice. There's cheese in the next room. You could raid the kitchen. The thing with Sangiovese, the main grape in Chianti, and this is 90% Sangiovese, is that there's always that kind of cherry tomato smell.
Yes.
But this one has so much more stuff going on. This is not a light, thin, spaghetti red sort of Chianti. This is the good stuff. This one's thick and chewy.
This is thick and chewy, and it's got some really nice herbs, like even basil.
Yeah.
It's really good.
This is definitely like not the spaghetti red. This is more like the lamb shank with polenta. Something hearty.
Yeah.
Something really hearty with a thick sauce.
With some gnocchi.
A gnocchi would be nice.
With bolognese sauce.
That sounds great.
Oh, yeah.
Yum.
Yep.
This one is definitely full-bodied. Not medium-bodied. Not medium to full. It's full-bodied. This is a big wine.
Yeah. We might finish this.
All right, Janet, you're on the podcast. Is this your first appearance on a podcast?
It is my first appearance on the podcast, and I'm so thrilled to be here.
Do you listen to podcasts? Do you have any favorites?
I don't.
Okay. It's a thing, I mean, I started hearing people talk about podcasts.
I'm listening to you now.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Sure. No, do you listen?
I have a few favorites. Alec Baldwin does a podcast I'm kind of a fan of.
He does?
He has a podcast.
Really?
It's called Here's the Thing. And he interviews other celebrities.
Wow.
And it's actually pretty interesting. He's got a great inquisitive style.
See, it's just, I'm a baby boomer.
Right.
And I'm a little slow getting into everything.
Right,
but
right.
once I do.
Well,
I really get into it.
The thing about podcasts is it's so based on having the phone in your hand and looking at it and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And that's something that people your age, people my age, we're like, I don't want to have the phone in my hand all the time.
Yeah, right.
So you have to go find it. You have to find a podcast.
Yeah.
Instead of old school, like when I was on the radio. The radio was always on. You got in the car, the radio's on. Right. I can twist the dial and find a station that I like. But the radio's already on. I don't have to grab my phone and open up the podcast app. And
right.
So I understand. I totally hear you as far as like because it took me a while, and I still don't necessarily gravitate to podcasts when I hop in the car. It's like, oh, the radio's on and it's playing something that I don't hate. So it's just there.
Right. So you put the podcast on your phone.
Yeah. And then the Bluetooth speakers in the car play it. Or when I'm at home, like say I'm in the kitchen cooking dinner, sometimes I'll put on Spotify and just play music. But sometimes I want to hear an interesting conversation. I grew up in the era of interesting talk radio.
Right.
Before we started recording, you talked about KGO in San Francisco.
Right.
I listened to a lot of Ron Owens when I first got here.
Right.
Because that guy was a legend as far as
great.
Talk radio is concerned.
Absolutely. Well, he's still alive.
We shouldn't talk about him in the past tense. Maybe one day I can get him to come on the podcast.
You should, with the two of you with your voices. Oh my God. It would be great.
I think he would like it up here.
I think he would.
I think Ron, if you know Ron Owens, let him know. I'm gunning for him.
Yeah, we're looking for you, Ron.
Are there any other projects in the works we can talk about? Movies? Because as far as I know, people that write screenplays Like they write them and write them and write them and write them.
Right.
So you might have a whole
Right. Well,
crate full of them.
it's acting. I was booked to play in Othello. So you're like, Othello? There's no women in Othello except Desdemona, right? They're making me Montano, the mayor of Cyprus, because I'm kind of, I guess
tall.
you would say I'm in a Shakespearean troupe.
Right.
And I played the first witch in Macbeth, and that was on stage for 3 months in downtown San Francisco. And then it was made into a black and white, very campy film by Christopher Coppola, whose son was in it. And I'm telling you, those Coppolas are amazing. Both of his sons were in it, in fact. So they're really a fun group, those Coppolas.
Are you doing any more work with the Groundlings down in LA?
Oh, the Groundlings. I love the Groundlings.
This is probably one of the first things you ever told me outside of like trying to sell me wine a few years ago. You said, I'm going to be down in LA. I have a thing with the Groundlings. And I'm like,
Yeah.
the Groundlings, the
Yeah.
improv troupe that
Yeah.
is kind of
Yeah.
a feeder team for Saturday Night Live and
That's
things like
right.
that. So you're still going down there and studying with them.
No, I'm not. It's really expensive to do that. But the great thing about the Groundlings, and the part I pat myself on the back about, is that you have to audition to study with the Groundlings. And there were 16 people, I think, in my audition class, and they took 8 of us. So here I am in San Francisco going, oh God, now what do I do? You know, and I bit the bullet and I went to LA every week, or I stayed down there. It was fantastic. And if you think about all the comedians you love,
That's
Melissa
amazing.
McCarthy,
Sure.
Will Ferrell,
Yeah,
all these people
right.
were Groundlings.
They started there.
It is so cool. The
That's
Groundlings is awesome.
So no
It-
more screenplays?
Yeah, I wrote a screenplay during COVID. It was another true story, and I needed to write it down, just to write it down, copyright it. It's has to be rewritten about 100 times. It's in Spanish and in English, and it's called Santa Marta, and it's a true story because I'm crazy. You know that, Mike, right? You know that from talking to me. Oh, let's see. One other thing I did during COVID is
Yes.
with Shakespeare, I played Gertrude in Hamlet. I was Hamlet's mother.
Unstoppable.
That's me. I'll stop when I die.
There you go.
right? Yeah.
Janet Dyer has been my guest. The Tall Mike Wine podcast was conceived, is written, produced, edited, hosted, and maintained by yours truly. I'm also the janitor. I recorded on a program called Audacity. Our host site is called Buzzsprout. The theme music was composed by Jeremy Marzen. To see what we're up to, follow me on Instagram at Tall Mike Wine. Send me an email for coasters, comments, suggestions, to recommend a guest, whatever, to tallmikewine@gmail.com. From the Vintner's Room at Nicholson Ranch Winery in Sonoma. Thanks for joining me. Tell your friends. Tell Ron Owens. For now, cheers.